We're ready? Everybody ready? All right, so we'll call the Select Board meeting to order on November 19th at 6:30 PM. Hello, everybody. I think this one's going to be a fairly short meeting relative to other meetings. So we're going to start off with our normal public comment. Anyone in the audience? Vanessa? Nope? Okay. All right, so the first substantive item is we've had a request from Dave Ferris's office through his in-house counsel, Brian Charvel, to basically take a look at a recent Fuss and O'Neill project that relates to his property at 250 Turnpike Road. So, Mr. Ferris, why don't you either go to this one or that one? Yeah, whatever one you prefer.
Yeah,
sit down, stand up,
Yep.
whatever.
Actually, standing, absolutely.
So try to make a long story short. Fuss and O'Neill has been the long-term planning board peer reviewer. And the project at 250 Turnpike Road is pretty much done. There's a bond that still needs to be released, and Fuss O'Neill was basically engaged to come in and basically sign off on the work that the bond was there to basically support. The proposed work was estimated at about $11,000, and Mr. Ferris's office thought that that amount of money was much more than it should take to do the few final things that had to be done. So they wrote us an email and asked us to please take a look at this. So we got the email, took a look at the Planning Board General Procedure Rules and Regulations, and there's only one piece of it that's applicable to this. And Mr. Ferris is aware of this. They actually have this too, so they know what this says. So the very last page talks about an appeal. So we consider this an appeal of the Fuss and O'Neill proposal. Jay Tellerman has weighed in. He said that we should have this hearing tonight to discuss this. The only time that we've got any authority or any standing in this, and I'm looking at the attorney here if I say this wrong, is under two circumstances, and I'm just going to read what they say. So the appeal section is section 5.3, and it says, the selectman shall conduct a formal hearing within 20 days of receiving a written appeal of consultant selection by an applicant. Two circumstances may disqualify the selected consultant. These conditions constitute the only grounds for an appeal. One is a conflict of interest. A consultant shall not have a financial interest in the project under review or be in a position to financially benefit in some way from the outcome of the pending review process. Second, lack of appropriate qualifications. A consultant shall possess the minimum required qualifications. The minimum qualifications shall consist of either an educational degree in or related to the field at issue or 3 or more years of practice in the field at issue or related field. So that's it. That's the two things that would allow us to go further with this. So anybody want to say anything before we let Mr. Ferris?
No, except that sounds like a very narrow
Yeah, as near as it can be.
set of grounds for appeal, so hopefully comments are limited strictly to that.
Right.
Okay?
Okay. So can we just ask the first question? I assume that Fuss and O'Neill does not have a financial interest in your project,
That's right.
okay? And is there any question on whether they're qualified to do this work as far as?
Well, other than the fact that all of the work is being routed to one firm, and so I would respectfully take the position that they have a very big financial interest in it, in the sense of their determination of hours or work product that they put into the project will directly benefit or enrich their firm and only their firm. And I kind of had a very short prepared remarks, and I think at the end of my remarks I would for lack of a better term, rescind our appeal, because I believe from town council there's an action already in place to replace Fuss and O'Neill.
Yeah,
But
well,
this appeal was very important, I think, to bring the select board and the ZBA, which I think have been very pro-business and working with developers. I'd sort of open my remarks with a lot of gratitude to this select board, each and every member, who've worked with all of our staff tirelessly and who've been very, very constructive with our firm, as has the ZBA, David, who's run that board phenomenally, and very sound minds and reasonable guys who have really, really made the town shine in terms of working both with the select board and the ZBA from the very beginning on all of our projects. So I'd sort of start my comments with everybody in our firm feels like it's a very first-class operation, both with a lot of the staff that we deal with, even on sort of the inspectional side and whatnot. And I don't want to get too far afield of why we're here, but we're really here over that Beehive appeal. And the reason I still wanted to be heard on this appeal is so that we don't have to have this issue reoccurring where we're at loggerheads with a town employee, say the town planner, over the rules and regulations.
That's not the point here, though, Kathy, right?
I agree. So we really
stay
got to
on
keep
point.
this
Yeah.
Yep.
narrow. So Dave, we appreciate the comments on the,
Well, right now, there's sole procurement. So in every situation in procurement at the planning board level, if you're only using one person, the person first of all, it differs from every of the other departments like ZBA and every other community that does it. And when you're giving out over $10,000 awards without giving a second bid into the process, you're gonna end up with appeals.
But that's not
we
the point
agree,
here.
we agree, but we really got it.
Not the point.
This is on the agenda, right, to basically look at the appeal. And the appeal says one or two things has to happen here. And yes, Fuss O'Neill is going to get paid for the work, obviously, but that's not what that conflict of interest is trying to do. They're trying to say Fuss O'Neill has a direct financial interest in your project, which clearly they don't, correct?
Right.
Okay,
But
you would
there's-
know if they
Yes, that is true. You're also, I think, beholden by the town bylaws that say that there's a bunch of other language in there, and I think you're honing in on 2 points. There's very direct language in your town bylaws that require that the planning board work constructively with the applicant, and this is the key piece, that it's reasonable fees. And that's point 2. Point 3 is it requires a vote. I asked for the vote record. That was never supplied. I would respectfully argue this is a project that had a 99% interior renovation. This is
That's
We
not the issue
understand,
here.
we understand, but everything you may be saying may be totally true, have validity, whatever, but that's not our, planning board's totally independent of select board. We're independent of them. They're elected. So they've got bylaws they have to conform to, but we don't have the authority to go to them and say, we want you to pick somebody else, or we think this bill's too much. All we can do is look at these two things, and if neither are
No,
applicable.
we're going to, I opened my remarks with where I opened the remarks are, we're going to rescind the appeal. We're trying to put the board and the town in a position where we're shining a light on conduct that's inconsistent with every
That's
other
not
community.
the point here.
Okay,
though, Kathy.
but the agenda item says, we got to deal with these two things, so we got to get this out of the way,
Right.
okay? So, do you agree that neither of these apply?
No, I actually just made it clear that this board is acting inconsistently with the way the other boards in Southborough are acting. The
that's not the
ZBA is
point.
going out and, so they have a direct financial interest. They set the hours, they set the
Mr. Ferris.
amount of time.
So,
Please, we got to stick on what we're here to tonight, whether we've really got any standing in trying to deal with your disgruntlement over this invoice. And I don't see how we do. Does anybody disagree with this?
nope.
Okay, hold on now. Okay, so just to be clear, Fuss O'Neill has no financial interest. I know they're getting paid. Of course they're making money, but they don't own a piece of this property. They're not part of your LLC or whatever, right?
Right.
Okay, and then number 2, I don't think there's any issue
They're not
that
the
they're...
reviewer now of record anyway with the town, as of what we were told a couple hours before this meeting.
I think you may be right. I don't know that for a fact. I've heard the same thing, that they're getting out of the municipal business, so this is kind of a moot point as
So
far as Fuss
it's a
O'Neill
moot
going
point.
forward.
We don't need the formal vote on it, but we wanted to make sure this select board was aware, given it's being controlled by a town employee.
Okay, but you agree these two points do not apply in this case?
I don't agree. I believe that the firm, when you give a no-bid contract to one firm, you're financially incentivizing them into the hours that they decide they
But
want.
Dave, that's not what this says. It says they've got a financial interest in your project, so they do not, right? I mean, they just don't.
Right.
Okay, and then second, they're clearly educationally qualified. I mean, I don't think there's an issue there. So I don't think that we can go any further with your appeal of that invoice. I think you're going to have to take it up with the planning board, and they may talk to Fuss O'Neill.
So I would just respectfully ask then, all the other requirements around working with the applicant constructively, assigning reasonable fees, the buck stops at the town planner. So we're going to have to take action against the town planner to shine a light on conduct that's not
But
following
that's
the bylaws.
not why we're here now.
So you can do that, right?
This is-
Right.
You can get people to run for the planning board next time there's a seat up. But our focus tonight on the agenda is these two things, and I don't think they apply. So Jay said, we knew they didn't apply. We didn't think they applied. But
Right.
Jay said, we need to go through this, so we have. So I think the board will respectfully say that the two things don't apply, right? So therefore, we can't go any further as far as the $11,000 invoice that you are unhappy with.
Yep, I'm ready to vote. Al, did you have a question?
Okay, go ahead, Al.
I think you bring up a different issue, which I think we should consider. It's not on the agenda tonight, and
Right.
we should put it on the agenda as to the standards for when a competitive bid is required in this particular instance. It may require, a bylaw change, but I'm concerned, I'm troubled by the idea that, we're doing no bid contracts in excess of $10,000. And, it's not a huge sum of money, but it's not a small sum of money either.
Right.
And,
yeah, you have
and
a gold
it's-
standard employee like Laura who's doing it really right and well.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
So I
want to
think
put
we
it on
have
this agenda?
a larger
for-
issue that we should put on the agenda for discussion at a future meeting, and hopefully you can join us. And, I asked town council the same set of questions you guys asked, and, under the very narrow definitions that we're constrained to for this process, we don't really have a lot of choice, but I think we do have the responsibility. We're $150 million short of development, commercial and industrial development along Route 9.
Right.
And we need to be taking proactive steps to make sure that we can have quality developments along Route 9 that can help us pay for the things that we all want to have.
Right.
Because they're very expensive.
Yeah, and that was part of,
That's
in
not the
terms of
point here,
looking
though.
at this appeal, that was part of what I had, prepared to highlight, the fact that there is $50 million of pending projects, that are going to lead to almost $700,000 of tax revenue. But if we're going to be loggerheads appealing, reasonable and these kinds of standards, it would be great for this select board to take a very good look at those issues, even without having a whole hearing about it, just.
But that's not our point.
Okay, so
here.
you heard what Mr. Hamilton said, okay,
Right.
that we will consider bringing this up for a future, but we got to deal with what's on the agenda tonight.
Right.
That's what open meeting law.
So we actually don't need a formal vote because we've been told by town council that the
But it's here, let's
Bus
take
and
it.
O'Neill come.
We're going to take a vote anyway, just to say we close it out. Okay, so Sam, you want to make the motion?
I move we deny the appeal.
Andrew, anything to say?
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't begrudge you from taking this appeal, and I'm not going to vote to support it just because for the reasons that Kathy has mentioned, but, I mean, it seems like you were really appealing the amount of a quote rather than the selection of a consultant, right? And I think there's a distinction there, but the thing that you were concerned about was you were charged a little over $11,000 for a peer review of releasing a bond of like $80,000.
Right. And
So
we've never,
and it was
ever.
72 hours of work to
Right,
do
for
that.
something that should take 3 or 4,
So,
Right.
I think sometimes in the select board world, we just assume everyone knows some things that not everyone knows about, and I don't begrudge you kind of agitating a little bit about this, but
yeah, I just want to go on record, we've never, ever, in any community, appealed to peer reviewers' fees. And, if the bylaws didn't say things like reasonable and work with the applicant, we wouldn't be here tonight. And if there weren't a big deviation, which we could talk at another time, from every other community's policies, we wouldn't be here.
And I think Al makes a good point. There's also consultants that we employ who we just have employed because we've done it historically. That does make sense to at some periodic basis. Maybe it's just kind of an informal policy to take a look at. whether we can get better pricing, because I think it's good for the board, for the town, and also for the residents.
Right, and we're getting way beyond what's on this agenda item, so can we
Yeah,
just,
But I just figured that I would offer that comment, because we have people that come and comment about things kind of all the time. There's just some reasonableness, I think, that, as I said, I don't begrudge you bringing the appeal, but I just think that I'm constrained to not vote for it.
okay, so we've had a motion by Sam, can we have a second? Okay, I'll second it. All in favor of denying Ferris Development's appeal of the Fuss and O'Neill invoice for $11,000? So that's, okay, Marguerite? Okay, all right, so that is a denial of, you raised your hand grudgingly, right? Yeah. Okay, all right, so 4 supported, denied it, 1 supports, not denied it, correct?
It's more complicated.
Okay, but is that where you want your vote?
Yes, I want to know. I want to vote no.
Okay, all right, so you did, so it's 4-1 to denied. Okay. More to come, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
time. And
Okay.
again, I'd end with how I started. We are very grateful that we have a great select board and CPA. Cheers.
Thank you.
I'm going to sit because I'll end up.
That's absolutely your choice. So while he's getting set up, I will give you a brief intro. So Mark used to be, this is Mark Davis, he used to be on the planning board, so he's got a pretty rich background in things. He's currently on the Neary Building Committee with me and 5 others, and he's on the Neary Building Finance Subcommittee with Andrew Pfaff and I. So I've gotten to know him well, and he has been in my ear on this for a while, so I thought it'd be a good chance for him to come and talk to us about what he thinks might be a project for the train station.
Mark Davis, 13 Schuyler Drive. I was going to come with about 3 different hats and just keep putting them on as I go along. One would be my railroad hat, because I've worked with the MBTA for about 5 or 6 years, at least during this century and not last century, and working on transit-oriented development sites all across eastern Massachusetts. I'll put on my developer's hat because I've worked for a multitude of developers, one that specializes in sewage treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, and other infrastructure projects. And I've also been with Perini Corporation, who specialized in, on their real estate side, when they had a real estate division, specialized in pre-planning large industrial projects so that when a developer would come in, within 90 days, they'd get a building permit. It was all pre-planned and ready for the town to take action. To some extent, each one of those hats that I've worn is exactly what I'm going to propose to you, that we pull all of those expertises together in one front, which is to work on a 40R/40S, there's 2 provisions, zoning district, also known as a smart growth district at the train station. If you want to flip to the next slide. This is a map from the MBTA GIS system showing exactly what's down at the station. The blue area is the rail corridor, and that's actually owned by MassDOT Rail. It's not owned by the MBTA. And as an aside, I am a part-time sub-consultant to MassDOT Rail, but I don't really have a conflict. Currently working on utility contracts way out in the western part of the state on the Berkshire line, and will continue eastward, but probably will not touch this particular rail line. When MassDOT Rail owns a rail line, they own about 350 miles of rail in Massachusetts. They're just under the MBTA. This rail line was owned by CSX. Yeah, they owned, the MBTA took it to Newton. And CSX owned it all the way out to Albany. They keep going. From Newton to Framingham, the MBTA took it and then bought the rest of the line to Worcester, I'm going to say 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
This was in it. Going off track, sorry. But
That's okay.
No, that's good.
It's important. It's important to understand that because everyone assumes the MBTA owns this particular line. So when we're dealing with the line, we actually do deal with the MBTA because when the MBTA is the major user of the line, MassDOT Rail assigns the management of the line over to the MBTA. So MassDOT Rail owns it, MBTA manages it, and they manage the contracts for the underlying railroads. So CSX still operates and Amtrak operates. But if whatever we do, we don't have to deal with all of those railroads. That's done by the MBTA. The area in purple is the areas owned by the MBTA. And it includes the station parking lot. It includes everything to almost the center of the Sudbury River. It includes the mill pond in back. And that's actually the historic pond that was used by Corderville Mills. And there's a little hook right to the right where it says Mill Pond. That's the dam. There is a dam in there. As an aside, my fingerprints are on it. The dam was inspected in 2007. It's in poor condition, but it was determined that if it failed, the impacts of it would be minimal because there's enough wetland area downstream to take that in. MassDOT Highway had a copy of that, and the culvert that was replaced under river, I believe, has the capacity to take the flows if that dam ever disappeared. If the dam failed, all it would do is drain the mill pond. It's what's holding that mill pond in place. There are two little purple sides on the Fitzgerald's parking lot side, and I'll come back to those when I come back to the slide. You'll also note how close Hopkinton is and how close Ashland is. The next slide. Here's an old historic picture of the Corderville Mills. I just want to point out that I have no clue when the site was completely excavated because the parking lot generally goes downhill. Notice how flat it was when the mill was there. The mill was at least 4 stories tall. If you go to the next slide, you'll see another picture of it from the Hopkinton side with the mill pond, and it's 5 stories. There was a fire a long time ago, and the mill was reproduced after that. And if you recall your history, the mill located here because of the power supply they could generate by the water, and the fact that the railroad was here to bring all their workers to the mill. Next slide. 40R. In the early 2000s, the MBTA started a program called Transit-Oriented Development. Transit-oriented development is high-intensity, dense development within a half a mile of a train station. This is exactly what I did for the MBTA. Approach communities both in Boston, all the way out to Newburyport, all the way out the Worcester line and south. Predominantly, we worked with the suburban communities with zoning. Westboro did it, Ashland did it, Framingham did it. At the time, Southborough really wasn't interested. Grant money was given to Westboro to put the zoning in place. They put the zoning in place. Ashland ended up with a piece of land that I ended doing a bid process. Where the farmers market is owned by the Housing Authority. And they, at some point, may be putting housing there. We found in the suburbs, it was, well, up and down. I'll show you a very successful project in a second. 40R came into place about 2004, and it incentivized putting in high-density development within half a mile of a railroad station. So it was the housing side of state government that responded saying, well, we have to give some money to this. The MBTA is not going to give money to this, but we can. So if you go to basically it's allows city and towns to adopt smart growth zoning. That's what it's also called. And it permits denser housing production. The benefits, there are zoning incentive payments directly to the town, somewhere between $10,000 and $600,000. Initially, no strings attached. Now what they do is they do assess it, and it can only be used for capital items within the town. Anything.
All you do is have to adopt and overlay 40R, and you get the payment, period. No matter what you do with that zoning.
Right.
Whether anything happens or not.
They may be triggered when a building permit's taken out. There are some trigger dates to it. Secondly, there's payments per unit when the building permits are issued. And there's reimbursement up to $3,000 per pupil for school reimbursement.
One time.
No, I think it's ongoing, to be honest. Now, again, I'm not an expert, so we can check those questions. There is a higher state match for new school buildings. They have triggered basically a 1% reimbursement to new school projects. For Neary School, that's roughly a $800,000 payment back to the town. No strings attached. That's pretty significant. And there's more favorable consideration when applying for discretionary grants. In 2010, Natick decided they would do their reimbursement with the school building group. And they applied for the 1% grant. They had a smart zone district, and if you know Natick, it's on Route 27 where the old Natick paperboard mill was. And they put their zoning there, and if you drive by it today, you'll see what came out. It's actually a rather nice, intense development on that site. There were some 21E issues, but they worked through all of those. It's within walking distance of an old rail trail, which is the old Saxonville branch.
So every town around us has a 40R except for Southborough?
Nope, very few.
Okay, he said Ashland does, Natick does, Framingham does,
There's a map.
Westboro does.
There's a map coming up. I'll run that by you. But basically, out of the blue, they were given $800,000. They didn't expect it, but because they had it in place at the time, it was granted when their school building project started. So it was a real bonus to the whole situation. They talk about the density between 8 and 20 units, which is right around where the MBTA communities bylaw is. As an aside, by the way, the MBTA had very little to do with the community bylaw they just went through. This was, again, the housing side of the state that proposed that, and the MBTA was taken back because they were only given a month or two to review it and comment, and they just kind of said, go with it. So when we talk about the MBTA communities, it's only because they're basing it on where rail and transit goes, and that's it. The next slide does have a map. It's back to 2017. Not a heck of a lot has happened in the last couple of years, so it's fairly accurate. I will note that almost every single one of those communities has a rail line running through their town that has adopted this zoning. Plymouth was one of the first in 2004 to request to the MBTA to do exactly what I'm proposing to do, which is to merge both the TOD process with the MBTA and a 40-hour zoning. They did it and accomplished a project that met the goals of both organizations. That's Cordage Park, and it's both a housing and business development right at the train station. It was a large parcel. The next one is, I'm just going to walk you through, this is a transit-oriented development process that I was involved in from day one, and it'll give you an idea of the process with the MBTA. Woodland Station had a surface parking lot, which is that long building to kind of the left side of the site. That's where their surface parking was. To the right, you'll see a little square building with actually solar panels up on the roof. That's the parking garage. And that was a maintenance facility for the Green Line. And you'll kind of look at me and say, well, that's a transit line. They're actually train lines. It's a LRV, light rail vehicle, is the actual term. So they're classified as rail lines, even though we don't look upon it that way. Basically, the deal was that the developer, New England Development, would come in. They ran a community process with the city of Newton. They obtained permits from the city of Newton for 180 units on a 325-car parking lot in a 5-story building. That building that you see with the white roof right to the north of them is a nursing home, but it's way up on a hill. You can't even see it from the station. The station is deep. To the right is Brayburn Country Club, and they were part of the project. And where Woodland is in the title is Woodland Golf Course. And the building to the bottom left is the Newton Wellesley Hospital. Basically, the deal was that they would build a replacement parking garage for the MBTA. The MBTA required 10% more spaces. So it was roughly 375 spaces, 3 stories, right up against a neighborhood. And we had to work out easements with Brayburn because we needed a little piece of land from them. Brayburn got rights to cross the entrance drive to get to their maintenance facility, and the golfers loved it because the maintenance trucks weren't driving around the golf course. Once they built the garage, at their cost, not through a public procurement process, it was privately built, they then swapped. The T gave them the parking lot, and the T took the garage. They basically walled it off, and the developer then could build his project. He also completely refurbished the station at his cost. He made the station 100% handicapped accessible because the Green Line was bringing in new cars at the time. So basically, he got an 85-year lease. We did a discounted cash flow analysis, and it was so darn close to the price of the garage that the developer walked in, and all he put into the site was exactly what it cost him to put the garage in. If you go to the next station, you'll kind of see a visionary plan. That's the entrance. That's the 5-story building, and if you flip to the last one, that's the drive. That drive services the parking garage. That drive services Brayburn Country Club's maintenance facility. That drive also serves the apartment complex. They were able to drop their parking down to 1 car per unit and worked out a deal with the MBTA that they could house excess parking at a paid rate over at the parking garage. So the hours that the MBTA wasn't using the garage, it was being used by the apartment complex. They are right across that roadway, and they can walk to the station. It is one of the more successful apartment complexes, very high-end, 25% affordable. so a very high affordability rating. The garage happens to be one of the Red Sox garages. It is utilized by the MBTA because it's easy to get to, full, and you can get right into Fenway Park. People use it more than they use Riverside, which is 5 minutes away. I point all of this out. I do have a picture of the garage buildings. When you say 3 stories in a garage, it actually is not as big as a commercial building because the ceiling heights tend to be a little bit lower. So the footprint of the garage is actually lower. And the neighborhood who we dealt with pretty consistently, that was an objection on their part. But once they saw the height, it was no longer an objection to them. So if you go back to the second slide, back to the MBTA station. Here's what my present thought is, and I'll quickly run you through the MBTA process, is to duplicate exactly what we did at Woodland Station. I would propose that the developer purchase McCarthy Pool's warehouse building, relocate them somewhere else in town, build them a building somewhere else in town. This is a typical developer's project where they need to relocate somebody. That's the location for the garage. It's down low. You could actually get a 4-story garage in there and you wouldn't see it because the Colonial building in front is going to block it. Their fence will block it. The second level of the garage would go right to the tracks. The track platform could be extended to the garage. So those that are commuting would then enter the garage. The second floor is the premier floor. So they could walk right onto the platform, walk across their own bridge, and they're right there at the station ready to take the train. That distance is about the same as Woodland because that was an objection early in that process. Oh, all these people are going to have to walk so far to the garage. When they were polled, they said, well, no, there's a benefit of having my car in a garage. I don't have to chop the snow off in the winter and all of that when I come back. That's a good thing. So it worked out for them. The other portion of this site, which may very well be included, would be Fitzgerald's parking lot. When the MBTA did this in the station, and I was chairman of the MBTA study committee when the station was being designed, they originally wanted to take the parking lot and actually put parking there, but they pared it down for expense purposes. I would highly recommend that Fitzgerald's be part of this project and a portion of the development be done on that side. So if you think of high intensity development, I'm thinking of trying to replicate what might have been there 150 years ago, making the train station the center of the community. A high-rise residential development over the parking lot, and in the front, some local, walkable retail in conjunction with Fitzgerald's. Fitzgerald served as the general store of the mill. The MBTA, there was a study done with the, prior to the MBTA bylaw of TOD possibilities, and I'm going to have to get you links to these
What's
studies.
TOD?
TOD,
TOD?
transit-oriented development.
Sorry.
MAPC did a study in 2012 and basically determined all the stations in the system and how developable they were. Southborough was about as low as you could go. They basically classified them all as high value and worked their way down. Southborough is linked in like Lincoln, a few other stations where it's mostly undeveloped land around it. It's land not suitable for development. And that's why we've had so much trouble with the MBTA communities bylaw. We are one of the more unique stations in this Worcester line. We are the only station that doesn't have sewer. There isn't any other station. We're the only station that doesn't have other than Grafton, but they have a business park next to their station, and they have a school right there. Other than Grafton, we're the only one that it doesn't rest in a downtown district. So we really have something to say to the town. From the MBTA standpoint, and let me just take you quickly down that track. When the MBTA wants to do a project at a station, they are exempt from zoning. They are exempt from the Rivers Act. They are exempt from local Concom, just by virtue of the statutes that they work under. In 2021, I think, 18% of the revenues generated by riders, that's all they've received. The rest of what the MBTA lives on is a major portion of the sales tax goes to them, and federal and state subsidies. The one gentleman at town meeting was actually correct. They're essentially bankrupt. We don't call it that. There is one passenger rail system in the United States that's profitable, and that's the one that runs in Fort Lauderdale. Every public passenger rail system needs heavy subsidies.
So Mark, I just got to make sure I understand. So you're proposing, who does this project, the MBTA or a private developer?
Who's the developer? Yeah.
I'm going
Okay,
right to
all
that point.
Okay.
The MBTA generates what's called non-fare revenue. It's revenue associated with parcels, with land, with advertising, where they can generate revenues. All the billboards you see throughout the MBTA system generate an incredible amount of revenue. All the little billboards at the stations are all revenue producing. So when they do a project at the station, what they want to do is either make money in a long-term lease or get benefits associated with maybe 10% more parking. Now they don't even want to own a parking garage. I found out that they would prefer just to have a long-term commitment to park there, let somebody else maintain the garage. So basically, this would be classified as non-fare revenue. It's a good thing for the MBTA. Plus, they get additional ridership, but they don't rely on that 100%. And that helps support the public transportation system. Basically, the town would request to the MBTA that would like to do a project under the 40R provisions at the MBTA station. The MBTA then would canvass all the various departments that have an interest in the station. They'd talk to the parking group, they'd talk to railroad operations, they'd talk to Keolis, who operates the railroad. All of those people would have a say. And if they have a serious objection, it wouldn't happen. The parking, actually, they're being talked to now. I've made a call into a friend at the TOD department, and she's talking to the parking group now. They kind of hold the sway because that's their interest. But we think they would agree to a long-term lease commitment in a garage and not do ownership over there, which is actually a good thing.
Someone else owns a garage. and
Once the
then-
canvassing comes back, the MBTA also will never do a project under which a community effort hasn't been done, and this is what I specialized in, going through the community efforts. So we would go in and totally go through a community process of size, density, how you're dealing with the traffic. What is this thing going to look like? How many units are there? What's the breakdown between 3, 2, and 1 bedroom units? What are the affordable units going to look like? Who's going to be in the retail? We can set conditions. We can get this thing to pan out. And it involved local neighborhoods. It involved the historic commissions. It involved Concom. It involved all the players in the town that wanted involvement in what was going to happen at that station. So what I would recommend is that we go through notification process and then come back and set up that committee to actually do the process. Furthermore, and we have a strong case because of how this station is classified as undeveloped, to basically go back to the Commonwealth and ask for a pause in the implementation of the MBTA zoning.
Can you swap the zoning at some point?
What I'm suggesting is, because our zoning doesn't match what's needed in those MBTA zones, and we don't know what it's going to look like, we don't know the massing, we don't know how it's going to be built, utilize this community process and then transfer portions of it to each of those sites so that we have the underlying zoning in place through this community process for the station and for these other 3 parcels. But ask them to pause, to give us the time to put that zoning in place. I would also suggest the town go to the new catalyst fund that the governor has set up and ask for a planning grant. This is what the Boston Redevelopment Authority did with me on all the projects in Boston. They would front that money.
How many acres is this?
It's about 7 acres,
So you could
including the mill.
end up with MBTA being 7 of the 10 right there?
So I would look to that catalyst fund to actually do the planning, and if you read what the fund is for, this is exactly what it's for, is to do the forward planning so that we have it in place.
But
I would then include developers in the process, which we did with Boston. We always had developers sitting at the table, and they would constantly check the financial analysis to make sure what makes sense. They were part of the process as well. At the end of the day, what we get from the MBTA is a memorandum of understanding. It outlines what is going to be built there, how it's going to look. The architect has developed schematic plans. The development community has tested it to make sure it makes financial sense, that we've masked the number of units. And we kind of set, let's say it's 20%, let's say we could even go as high as 25% affordable. And the MBTA's requirements are taken into account, that we're brought in Fitzgerald's, we're brought in McCarthy Pools, so that we know they're okay with the whole process. And at the end of the day, they have to put it out to bid.
But the first, am I wrong that the first step would need to be the town meeting would need to adopt a Chapter 40?
I'll get to that,
Which
which
is
is a
a-
quirk in here.
Which is a 2/3 vote.
The 1% that's given by the state building group needs to be in place prior to our vote.
You say the 1% that's,
The 40R needs to be in place prior to
Before we
our
get the
vote.
extra 1%, right?
There's 2 ways to do it. Delay one or the other. The 40R could be put in place
Yeah,
relatively.
but 40R goes first. That's the
40R
first step
goes
here. You got to
first.
get the 40R in place.
Yep, you could do it with a sunset provision.
but it would need to be a chain, you would need to enact it as part of the town's zoning bylaw, which would have to go to town meeting.
Correct.
So
And it is a
it'd be an
2/3 vote?
April town meeting, it's a 2/3
Correct.
vote for a zoning bylaw.
But the underlying zoning you could set it up to take another 18 months after that to get that into place.
But given the razor-thin margin for extra density for the MBTA community thing, it seems to me like a 2/3 vote for this is a pretty big lift here.
Mhm.
Unless there was support for this versus what we put in place.
A lot of moving parts, complicated message, short time frame for the 1%. To me, the biggest bonus here is the $800,000 or whatever in terms of the MSBA.
And the reimbursement to the schools and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
other implementation number.
Except my read on the reimbursement for the school kids is that's dependent on the annual state budget cycle.
Correct.
And there's a lot of pressure on that, and people are not getting the money that they thought they were going to get originally out of that reimbursement. So that, to me, is not
I
very
did
compelling.
read something that the funding for that is under a separate fund. But it is
That's
still
not-
funded by the state, but it's a working fund.
Okay. I thought that was, to me, not very reliable, was my impression of that. But again, I mean, it is an interesting concept, but a lot of things have to happen in a world where, as I'm listening to people talk about the NERI project, a lot of concern about, what impact that has on taxes and so forth. So that's,
The one other,
certainty.
the one other elephant in the room, and I'll look to Al, is
Mr. Pachyderm,
how are you going to deal with wastewater treatment?
sure.
It's not going to happen unless you have sewer down there.
Well, sewer meaning a wastewater treatment plant.
Either wastewater treatment plant or Ashland is right there. If you hook into Ashland, you're into the MWRA system.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't think we can do that.
We've
but that's-
talked
that's-
with MWRA about connecting Route 9, and the answer is pretty clear.
No?
No. Yeah.
Okay,
how
but we
about-
could do a wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah, do that.
Okay,
Come back
how many
up.
more slides do you have?
That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
yeah.
So the question I have,
Okay, hold on,
Oh.
hold on. Okay, so you're ready for us to now ask
Ask
questions?
away.
And then I think we've got people here that may be from the neighborhood. I know we've got one, two, maybe? No? Something else? Okay. So we'll give you a shot at this. This is the first time we've heard this, so we're all learning. Okay, so Al, I'll start with you.
this is intriguing, and I guess the big question, which I think is for the neighborhood, is would something like this be preferable to what is currently on tap in the MBTA communities designations? Please, if, you've got more of a stake in this than almost anybody, so.
So my name is John Cage, 6 Parker Street, which is, if you look at that little, the purple arrow in the middle there, that's actually pointing to my house. It's a fascinating proposition. I think it's 18 months too late. The problem with the MBTA is we have a deadline of December, and we've already passed it at this point in time. What compromise we had about a year ago, one of the solutions was to use about 10 acres going down on the other side of the MBTA train tracks up to the Fitzy's parking lot, over into the park, across the road of 85, and then into the old bridal shop and that whole area to get that 10 acres. And the problem we had with the MBTA is when we put it into the system, it found that we needed 4 or 5 story buildings, and the neighborhood revolted. I don't think anybody in the Southborough was really adamant that we wanted a 5-story building in that area. Agreed, we had those in the area about 100 years ago, but that was 100 years ago, and there was substantially different housing in that area. So, reconditioning a factory like they've done in Natick is great. You take an eyesore and you've turned it into it's still kind of an eyesore to maybe some people, but at least it's a functional eyesore and you haven't replaced it with something brand new.
So put the MBTA 10 acres aside for a moment, right?
Yes.
Pretend it didn't happen, right? Would this be a type of project that you think you would be interested in and others interested in?
I think that if this is the thing where we would have to really understand what was really going to happen there. We're looking at a parking lot. If I'm looking at the Woodland Station apartments, I mean, this is a very nice apartment. I can see that the rent is $3,200 to $10,000 a month. I'm sure it's a very nice apartment. Whether that is something that would be happening there, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But the question is what kind of money and developer are we going to look into developing that? That's a question that we as the town, the planning board, the zoning board, would have to look into. Again, 18 months too late. I'm not exactly against it, other than this is all theory. This is all, you have to start the process, then we have to convince somebody to come in, the MBTA has to agree. There's a lot of conditions that have to happen here. And then we'd have to get the town to buy off on it, the citizens to buy off on it, on a particular plan. So would I say throw this out? No, I think we should look into it. But I don't think we should be putting a commitment down thinking we're going to get $800,000 and this is going to be Woodland Station. We have to have some realisticness to it because as I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but
Mr. Davis.
Davis, as Davis
Mr. Davis.
stated,
Mr. Davis, it's
Mr.
Mark Davis.
stated, this is the lowest spot of the MBTA list. It's very much hard to develop. There's no sewer here. I'm sure if we look at what Littleton is costing to upgrade their sewer for their MBTA communities, I think it's $75 million. That $800,000 is not going to help with us. So if we have to put millions of dollars of investment to get 800,000, I don't know if that's worth our time. So that's my 2 cents on that, I guess.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, make sure I understand the process here. We would have to put a defined 40R zone in our zoning ordinance in order to sort of take the first step?
No,
No? Well,
No,
I'm trying to understand the first
it,
step.
it can be done in a number of ways. If, and this is where I think we might need to sit down with town council to determine how that 1% on the Neary building would kick in and what's the process on that. Natick was easy because they had already started the process prior to their high school. Here, we're starting the process right up against the deadline. But there's a way to do that, which is just to put the district in, have a sunset provision until the community process is done,
Now,
and
when
then
you say
completely put the
district- I'm
zoning
sorry,
in place.
I'm going to go slow because
But that's okay.
when you say put the district in, that involves
meeting.
defining an area,
Yep,
okay, and saying, this is a 40, this is now zone 40R, and, if nothing is done in 18 months, then it goes back to the way it was or something else.
correct.
Okay, so that, our first step, were we to do this, would be to define a 40R district, put it in with, the appropriate weasel words to go back to where we were, and that we would have to do that at the annual meeting?
April 7th, because the special town meeting to vote on Neary's May 10th.
Yep.
That's the question that needs to go to town council, how that would work, but it could be done.
And the other piece of that, then, is at that point, we go to the MBTA and say, or do we do that in parallel?
I'd do it in parallel.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand.
The
Steps.
MBTA is a very distinct process.
Okay,
They want the town to go through the community process to answer just what the previous speaker talked about. And that's part of the zoning. That's what would occur during that sunset provision, is to go through the vision. What is this thing going to look like? How many units are going to be there? How is the parking? How's the traffic going to be handled? All those questions we still have on the MBTA. This is not a developer doing it. This is the community with developers present that are going to develop it and organize this thing in a way that the neighborhoods are comfortable, the historical society is comfortable. There may be some features in the station we want to change. All that's on the table. And once we put that MOU together, the MBTA goes its merry way and puts it out to a public bid. Now, the public bid is not something to be terrifically afraid of. There's a risk, but they're under different provisions than any other state agency. They're under 161A, and the underlying qualifying principle of of a bid is the highest responsible bidder. You can define responsible any way you want. So if we-
Lowest responsible bidder.
highest responsible bidder. You could have someone who bids higher, but he has questionable financing. That
Oh.
disqualifies him.
Okay.
So what happened in Woodland Station is you had New England Development go through the community process with the MBTA at their side. Then they basically put it out to bid. The only bidder was New England Development. They were the sole bidder. On others, there've been 2 or 3 bidders. And we had to look at those bids with a whole bunch of qualifications. And in all of those cases, it was the developers who took an interest in the project that knew exactly what they needed to bid to make it work. They're the winning bidder.
So,
Bring 'em over.
so
We got 3.
we put this district in place with the caveats. We go through this process. Is there then another vote to,
Yes, you'd have to put the underlying, you'd have to somehow get the MOU approved, whether it can be done at the selectmen's level or whether it needs to go back to a town meeting and put it in place. I don't know.
okay.
Okay, so I think this is a good start for tonight. We've got 3 people in the audience that have more questions, so, Mr. Wardley, James, can you hear us? There he is. Hey. James, you are muted. No, you're not. Hello. So we can't hear you.
Maybe go to someone else.
Yeah, so we're going to go to another person, and we'll come back to you to see if whatever's wrong has been fixed. Who else is it? Paul? Hi, Paul. Is it us?
Must be.
So, Paul, we can't hear you either. So we may have an issue here. Who's the third person? Trish? Can you hear us? We can't hear you either. So, Vanessa, I don't know what's wrong. Okay, so we're going to try to make you guys panelists and see if we can hear you. This is all very interesting, Mark. So in Woodland, the people live there just go right down to the train station and hop on their train?
Right, yeah, very convenient.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Right, you'll get,
James is back. Can you hear us, James? Still can't hear you.
James, can you hear us? So guys, I don't think this is going to work. Vanessa, is there anything we're going to be able to do quickly? All right. So guys, if you can hang in there, we'll come back to you. We're going to check with our IT head and see if we can figure this out. So if you can just hang in there, we'll come back if we can hear you. Okay, so we're going to move on for the moment. Can you stay for a few more minutes?
Sure.
Question?
Okay.
I have a question.
Couple more
Go
questions.
ahead, Marguerite.
Go ahead.
Sam, you spoke
So go ahead.
I think we're neighbors. I'm down the hill from you.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions. One is of the growth zones in here that are Zone
Yep.
40R, how many of them have been built on? This is 2017, you said.
I can stare at them and kind of rattle through them. Newburyport is one of them. Plymouth is another.
Yep.
Haverhill has a big project. Lawrence, Lowell, Fitchburg, Pittsfield. I should know what Great Barrington did, but I don't because I'm out there all the time. I'm not sure on the I know Plymouth,
Okay, but a
Boston,
lot of them, it sounds like.
Boston,
No?
there are tons of them.
Yes, okay.
And they even go through the community process. There'll be a building on top of Back Bay Station. There is a building going up at South Station. Those are a lot of air rights development. But they go through community processes. I went to Mattapan Square for 3 years, Dudley Station, Mission Hill. All of those now are active projects.
Okay, but the answer to the question, Margaret, it's not just sitting there. There have been many
They've been
projects,
built
right?
on, yeah, and my other question was, Newton has a mayor?
That's
Is that
correct.
right? Okay,
Right.
so they don't have a town meeting to deal with?
No, they have a
Town
city
council,
council
city
and a
council.
mayor.
Yeah, city council instead. And my other question is a kind of like, thank you for knowing all of this. It's fantastic. I mean, it's like a 101. But my question was, different federal administrations give different amounts of subsidy to rail. How much variation is there going to be between different types of federal administrations?
I can tell you this administration,
Currently?
yes, the bill that was passed, the trillion-dollar bill, most of the rail work has been already put out. And there are 3 or 4 rail lines that are getting money. I don't think there's a rail line in Massachusetts that didn't. The MBTA got a big slug of cash out of that.
So they're kind of flush right now?
No, they're never flush. I think the rail overall will probably not change much between administrations. You may see some different, there may be a shift to supporting freight versus passenger rail, because passenger rail just needs the fund. Even Amtrak needs the funding. The only corridor of Amtrak that is profitable is the Northeast Corridor. Two other things I didn't mention and I will mention. There's only 2 major planned items for this rail line. One is it'll be electrified. They'll get rid of the diesel engines.
Coming out to Southborough, you mean?
Oh, to Worcester.
Yep. If you take the Amtrak line from New York, you'll see it. It's that big electrical, it's called a catenary, and the articulated arm goes up. The MBTA eventually will electrify the entire system.
Okay, so we've gone way over what I told you to
I-
do. So we're going to keep going, though. So, Marguerite, any more questions?
No, I just was wondering if, I'm assuming MBTA started as a kind of national thing that was, not MBTA, but it's sort of like, it didn't just start with Massachusetts saying we need it. It came from the federal government, correct?
Oh, no, it actually came from a number of planning groups around rail. It didn't initialize out of the federal
Or the
government.
federal- Okay.
Transit-oriented development was really developed locally. The MBTA was early. I think the earlier projects came from the West Coast.
Okay, I guess my question is, do funds dry up? All right, okay, thanks.
Sam?
Yeah, quickly, Marguerite, CHAPA did a pretty comprehensive study of 40R zoning history in terms of how many projects have been built, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little dated now, like 5 or 6 years old. That's a great source, so I would refer people to that. Question mark, in terms of the oversight, you said local permitting processes don't apply to these projects?
Well, this becomes the local permitting process, setting up this zoning.
Well, but zoning bylaws don't apply, you said.
Once you hit 40R, all the local zoning rules are
No.
not applicable.
That's not true.
Okay.
Oh, I thought that's what
That's
you
what we
said.
thought you
Once you
said.
deal with the MBTA, their exemption from the zoning applies.
Okay,
Okay.
so it takes a combination of MBTA and the 40R to get, okay.
Correct.
All right.
But for
If-
those projects, then, our zoning board is out of the picture. Concom, you said, is out of the picture as well?
Well,
Planning board, are they out of the picture as well?
the Concom only to the extent that an MBTA-driven project complies to the state codes.
So local
Local,
wetlands bylaws
they
don't
still
apply.
appear before it. I did some work down in the Weymouth project at the old Army base. And They appear before the conservation. They review everything. They do a stormwater management plan. You saw it there at the
But
Woodland.
can local Concom set conditions for these projects?
They can set conditions, but the conditions are more applicable to the state conditions.
Okay. not
Which is like a 40B.
How about planning board?
Planning board would approve it. They'd
Site
take a
plan
look at
approval?
it based on the underlying MOU zoning.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, it's a 90-day process, whatever the typical process is.
Okay, well, again, interesting concept. I agree with Mr. Cage's comment that, 18 months ago, this would have been very interesting. Now, a lot of moving parts,
I don't see why
lot
you
of
can't swap
challenges.
it, but we'll talk
a lot
about
of
that.
challenges in terms of communicating and getting
Yeah.
town meeting support here, which is
Andrew?
problematic.
I think this is a very, very complicated proposal, and in terms of what's really actionable for this year, I love stuff like this, but this is not something where I'm raising my hand to volunteer to, help shepherd something this complicated through. And I think you would need to really, in addition to yourself, get a whole group of people on board to even move forward with this, and the biggest stakeholder, I think, or to convince would be the planning board. And I don't know if you've had, you're planning making a similar presentation to them.
Well, they were supposed to be here tonight. They asked for the meeting to be tonight, and they're not here, so I'm not sure what happened, so.
I think the planning board knows I would walk over there and make the
Yeah.
same presentation. The key to this is the community process.
Yeah,
It's doing nothing less than what I did at Perini Corporation on large projects, where we would go in and master plan the entire site. We would show you the roads. We would show you the locus of the buildings, what type of uses that lot would create. And in one particular park down in Raynham, we did 330 acres. We bonded the road. We put the zoning all in place, lot by lot by lot. Johnson & Johnson came in with a huge orthopedic facility. We combined two lots. And within 90 days, they had a permit. Within 18 months, they were in business. It can be done, and this is exactly what I'd be looking at down here. Otherwise, the MBTA is not interested. They'll run a parking lot, they'll fill the potholes every now and then, and the station will be just what it is today. There's a
I mean,
chance to
we've
make it-
talked about this over and over. We've got to do something in this town in a couple ways, and more housing is one of them. So I don't want to give up on this on the first night. I think we continue to talk about it, and let's see if it goes anywhere. And I really appreciate what you've done. Okay, go ahead. And then we're going to go back to see if we can get these people who are on the Zoom, so.
So, John Palmer, 131 Parkerville. I do not live in the neighborhood down by the train station, but I live closer to Mark. I've heard Mark on this a couple of different times already. I think what's most compelling about this is in the name that Mark gave this, which is smart transit-oriented development. And I think what's compelling about it is it puts the town and the community in the driver's seat to solve the multi-family housing need that we have in this town. So I think that's what's most compelling to me in what Mark had to present tonight. It puts the town and the community in the driver's seat in terms of smart transit-oriented development.
Thank you.
And it adds one other thing. It adds
Quickly.
the ability to tax the improvements on the site,
Yeah, what you can't now.
which you're not getting any tax benefits now.
So,
because it's MBTA.
okay, James, can you hear us now? Do you think we solved it, Vanessa? I don't hear him. No?
Kathy, could you just call in and use him on speaker?
There he is. Well, we see him.
We can read lips.
Okay, James, can you signal, can you hear us? Okay, we just can't hear you. We can see you now. You want to try to call in on Marguerite's cell phone?
Oh, my God.
Do you know what your number is? Okay, call my cell phone, 508-380-3526.
You're going to regret that.
Everybody, I know, everybody's, that's why I was trying to get Marguerite to do it.
If,
Yes. Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, though, so others that are listening know who
Hi,
this is.
James Nicholas Worley, 94 Main Street. Thanks for bearing through me with these tech issues. Just wanted to chime in that this sounds like a really great idea, and my appreciation for Mr. Davis's, spearheading this idea on three things. One, I just pulled up the guidance from mass.gov. Adopting a 40R district is a simple majority threshold. That was part of the ones lowered in 2020, part of the zoning thresholds that was lowered from 2/3 to a simple majority. Second of all, that really great point that this would be good from a fiscal standpoint for the town. I was at tour of the Neary building this past weekend when I stopped by in town. And yeah, a lot of people are concerned about the impact of taxes over the next 5-10 years. And something I try telling people is that when we think about things, we need to think about the cost of not doing anything. And it seems like if we don't do anything here, we'd be leaving a lot of money on the table. So that's a really big one. And then the third thing is just sort of thinking about a lot of the opportunity we get as a community from this. When we think about transit-oriented development, what does that actually look like? It's not just a buzzword. It's that there's more people who don't have to drive to work every day, more people who can take the commuter rail to Boston, to Worcester, and, an opportunity for more neighbors in town, connecting people. One of the difficult things we had for the MBTA community zoning, when I suggested we lower the parking minimum from 1.5 spaces per unit to 1 space per household, is that we don't have a lot of businesses that you can walk to. But I think the important thing is that causation is kind of backwards. We're not going to get more small pedestrian retail until we have more people who will walk to it. And so I think this is just a great opportunity all around. I mean, we're seeing a lot more of these developments just across Massachusetts. Just this week, our neighbors in Hopkinton and Shrewsbury also adopted MBTA community zoning. So I'd just like to say this sounds already like a great idea, and I'd love to support the town looking into this however I can.
Thank you, James. I hope you're doing okay. Okay, who else is it? Marnie Houlihan's going to call in. Is there anybody else in the audience? Okay, so Paul Carter, let's do him. So Paul, if you can hear me, are you there? Okay. Paul, we're still having audio problems. You can probably hear us. We can't hear you. So can you call my cell, 508?
I got his number, I can call him, right?
What?
I got his number.
Okay.
Okay, never mind. We're calling you. So Paul, hold on. Then we'll go to Trish, then we'll go to Marnie.
Hi, Paul, it's Andrew Bennington. Would you like to speak? Okay, I'm going to put you on speaker. Ready? Pause 1 second.
Hi, this is Paul Carter.
Okay, now you are speaking to everyone.
Okay, Paul Carter, 6 Hillside Avenue. I'm a transportation engineer. I've always been interested in transit-oriented development from a planning point of view, and trying to do the right thing and move things forward. This is great. What I see, and Andrew, I think it's along your line of thinking, is that that this has been successful in cities, okay, where command and control comes from the mayor, from the top. Town meeting government comes from the bottom. So although I think this is great, I don't think it's practical, realistic. The sewage treatment plant, the Wetlands Protection Act is fully required on the MBTA projects. From a planning point of view, this is great, and it's in line with what the selectmen are trying to do to provide more housing and more affordable housing. But because this is not a city where things are determined top down, I don't think it's realistic here. That's all I have to say. Not to throw cold water on it, but that's my initial impression.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Trish, can you call, call 508-380-3526 if you want to speak.
Still there with hand up. She's still in the attendees.
But she's still not calling. She did not? Okay, let's go on to Marty. So Marty, I'm going to call. So Marty, call me. Marty, call. 508-380-3526. Okay, here she is. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so we're doing this a little bit. So we've got the microphone aimed at the phone, so just go ahead and introduce yourself so everybody knows who this is.
Great. People can hear me?
Yeah.
This is Marnie Houlihan. I'm 26 Clifford Road. I'm speaking actually as a planning board member, and I just want to thank Mark Davis and Kathy. You made the comment that planning board asked for us to move this meeting. So yes, we did, and I am here, and I am really interested in this. And I think that Paul Carter and John Cage have made salient points, as have all the speakers. I think from the infrastructure challenges that we have down by the MBTA, those are very complex for us to resolve. However, I would like to at least put my hat in the ring, if Mark's willing to work with me, to really think through like what are the kind of the not hurdles, but what are the stake in the ground things that we as a town have to think about to contemplate something like this. I don't think the administration, Healy, will barter a 40R for an MBTA. I think that's probably improbable. There's quite a bit of incentives to get this MBTA, but I think that it is worth our time to at least invest evaluating 40R as a potential opportunity, because I do think it would be a really interesting way to develop that in a thoughtful way to do it. I just don't know if we have the infrastructure to support it. So Mark and I have been emailing. I've been keeping the MBTA distribution list updated with information, and I would put an appeal out to anybody who's on the distribution list that if they're interested in kind of participating in some due diligence, really just to kind of roll up our sleeves and understand this a little bit more, I'm willing to spearhead this.
So I'm looking to my left at my fellow, it's fine with me. Mark?
That's fine.
So Marty, you understand the urgencies. So Mark's on the area building committee too, so he understands that we get an extra 1% as an incentive point if we have 40R in place by the time we vote on May 10th. Even if we, have it in place with nothing else done, it gets us it's probably $1 million because it's the gross, not the net. But anyway, so is everybody okay with this being the next step? Let Marty work with Mark and see what they can come up with, right? Andrew?
That sounds good.
Okay, so Marty, 5-0 informal vote, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just finish with 2 points, if I
Okay,
could.
quickly.
I
Because we
know
really
that-
we're so far over it.
I know, and I
Okay.
apologize, but I
Okay.
think it was worth discussion.
I don't disagree.
One, being the Luddite that I am, I will get you links to the MAPC report, which is terrific reading, the guidebook for 40R done by DHCD, the precursor to whatever it is now, and the CHAPA report. I actually have a quote from CHAPA, but I'll ignore that one. I just want to read a quote that came from the Southborough Historical Group. The loss of Corderville Mills is but one of Southborough's many historical if-onlys. If only the buildings had been allowed to survive a little longer, the nascent historical protection movement would have realized their incredible value as a mixed commercial, office, or residential site. Can you imagine how handy a condo complex with a hip restaurant and bar right next to the commuter rail station would be viewed by today's commuters? Or how much land might have been preserved from controversial state-mandated 40B projects if we had converted the complex to affordable housing and filled Southborough's quota of units? Of course, hindsight is 20/20, but Southborough needs to be far more vigilant these days in protecting its remaining architectural heritage. And as my parting comment, this is a perfect opportunity. All the planets are aligned in the state. They're aligned with the historical group, and they're aligned with our history, that we could make Corderville its own little village right there at the train station and satisfy a lot of needs that we need to really look at.
So I think that's a great way to end this, and thank you very much. And Marnie wants you to send her those documents, and she's going to create a Dropbox that anybody that wants to access it can just go to the Dropbox. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we've left anyone out, I'm sorry, but we've gone way over where they're supposed to be, so we're going to have to move on.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Which is that of the participants, maybe, I don't know, maybe we could manage this so that if there's people here who we know want to speak about items that are later on in the agenda, we can arrange some ways that we call them or something like that, given our technical difficulties. I don't know how many people are just going to leave because they were only interested here in the 40R discussion. Just a suggestion.
Okay. That's going to be kind of hard to pull. So we're going to announce that they should start calling us.
No.
Okay.
We'll
So
have to
Vanessa,
see.
we're not going to solve this problem, right? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Can we have like a 5-minute recess?
Yes, so we're going to take, the vice chair has recommended a 5-minute recess, so yes, 5-minute recess, we'll be back at 9 or 8 o'clock. right, so we're back in session at 8:04. Okay, moving on. Members' reports or chair report. So I wanted to talk about Veterans Day. Let's see, Al was there, Marguerite was there, I was there. I think you two were out of town. It was a glorious day, for one thing. I mean, my gosh, for November 11th to be whatever it was, 65, close to 70. I think normal turnout. It was inspiring. When you see Steve does a great job as far as running the service. I think there were probably 20 veterans that were lined up at the memorial. So I think it was beautiful all the way through. I think it was well done, as always. So I just wanted to thank him and show appreciation for what he did. Okay, NERI update. So the NERI Building Committee, Communication Subcommittee, has been trying valiantly to have as many public forums as they can to give people an idea of what the current school looks like. So they've had 2 tours in the last week. One was on Saturday morning. The other was Thursday night, I think. Not many people. I went to that one. Not many people came to that one. More people came on Saturday. I think there's probably, Marguerite, 20, 25 there. Then they also had a coffee at Finn the week before. They had it at a time where parents could drop off their children and go right in. So they had about 50 there, so that was a really good turnout. It's probably the best turnout we've had throughout the whole thing. So they are trying very hard to get as much information out as we can at this point. The committee will come in front of the select board one of the 2 December meetings, probably the 17th. Capital's come in that day too, so it makes sense for the NERI Building Committee to do it, so Jason only has to come once. So we will hear from them as far as just going through the project, where it stands, timeline, et cetera. So things are moving on. Sam, you said that Roger and Greg went to the Dolman's Club again?
I went to the Senior Center.
Center.
There was a presentation at Senior Center yesterday, I guess.
Okay, so you did that one too.
And that was about, I'd say 25, 30 people, something like that. So that was well received, I think. A lot of questions, but a lot of answers. So good discussion, and he's going to come back and do more later when they have more information, more data on some of the cost numbers.
Good. All right, so the project, the schematic design has started. We've got all the approvals from the MSBA to do that, so that's well underway. So we're, at this point, just kind of as far as the design goes, it started. We'll know more. We're going to vote next week on what type of contract to use. There's 2 different types to use, and they are different. So we're going to vote on that, and then the schematic phase will continue. So there's that. Okay, Al.
Yeah. Well, the longest journey starts with the first step, and Sam and I have been meeting with Bill Cundiff to. We've got a small stack of reports about wastewater treatment, and it's time to start thinking about what we're actually going to do. And so we met with the Framingham DPW, had a very good meeting there. They were, we didn't get thrown out. They were very cordial and helpful. And the question there was, could we connect into the Framingham system along Route 9, at least for some portion? They were willing to at least entertain the question. When they approached the MWRA, they got a less happy answer, and so we're going to continue to poke at that. I'd say that connecting into the MWRA system is a low probability event. Is that a fair statement, Sam?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Then,
But we'll continue to inquire.
yeah, then we also contacted Westborough and got back a note from the chair of their select board, who's also their representative to their wastewater treatment system. They know they have to expand their system. They have a moratorium in place at the moment. Obviously, their first priority is to stay in touch to deal with the existing users, which would be Shrewsbury and Hopkinton, as well as Westborough. But we indicated that we would like to at least understand what they're doing and that we have an interest in potentially connecting with that system. I sent a note off to Hopkinton to similar basis, haven't heard back yet. We are going to sit down, hopefully with Sampson and, I'm sorry,
Weston and Sampson.
Weston and Sampson,
Who did one study for us.
who wrote the more detailed report, and see if we can understand in a little more detail what it is they're suggesting. I think the culmination of this is we're trying to get smart enough to begin to ask the right questions and come up with a plan on how we get to a plan. It's time to, we've talked about this for a long time. We have had a lot of people tell us that it is one of the two barriers to more extensive development along, in particular, Route 9, but also in our downtown area. And so we need to, start rolling that rock uphill. It's this is a long process, but we got to get started. And so we'll keep you appraised as we proceed.
Can I ask just a administrative question? Claire sent us an email today with a report attached to it, right? Is the Weston and Sampson report the one we should digest? Is that the right one to look at? I'm not sure who wrote the one she sent.
Yeah, Lombardo Associates is another one, and then Paul Pasinski wrote another report.
Yeah.
We have all of those. We're looking at all of those.
Yeah,
Do they say different things?
Similar, but not.
Okay, well, I don't want to read 3 reports. Which one should you read if you're going to read one?
I would read the Weston and Sampson. What they do is they break, would you agree, Sam?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they break Route 9 up into essentially 3 separate zones and talk about and produce essentially estimates of how many thousand gallons per day are going to be produced in each zone with a full build-out. So that's probably your starting place. The Paul Pazinski's was more of an overview, and again, he comes up with a different idea. And we've got to digest all of these because they're all...
There's useful information in all of them. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's useful perspective, and so we're going to try and study this a little more, try to get, at least reduce my level of ignorance, and then...
Are there options that could work, and if so, what do they cost? What does
Yeah.
it take to get them done, et cetera, from a practical standpoint? And
Weston and Sampson only focused on Route 9?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where our biggest bang for the buck in terms of, if we're trying to... One of the things that sort of struck me is that if we had sewer services along Route 9, the office parks that we currently have as, acres of asphalt could easily build parking garages and become significantly more densely developed, which would mean that there would be far more taxable resources in that, along that zone. If you drive from Boston to Worcester along Route 9, you will see very, very, I'm not aware of another community where there's as much undeveloped land as there is in Southborough. Certainly not
Yeah,
from Framingham.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
thank you very much, and I appreciate your tenacity on this, and Sam's also. Okay, consent agenda, we've got A, B, C, D, E. No, I already knew that, so I'm not skipping him. I'd already checked, so, thank you. A, B, C, D, E, anybody want to hold the minutes?
Yep.
Anything else? I want to hold D, which is the Twin One Highland extension of its charge. Anybody want to hold B, C, or E? No? No? Sam? Okay. Sam, A?
Minutes, 2 things. Marguerite and I had the same one, so Marguerite, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I think it is Lund Bladfield, L-U-N-D-B-L-A-D.
Yep.
It is.
Line 72.
Sam's got the same thing, yeah.
Okay. Lundblad is correct.
Yep.
Yep, and there's 2, I think it shows up twice. It's mentioned twice. And then the other one, do you want to take Heritage Day?
Heritage Day, singular, it said days in lines 93, 94, and 101. So
The reason I'm
basically,
repeating what you're saying is Bridget's got to understand what you're
Typos.
saying, so
Yep.
talk clearly,
Heritage Day, singular, instead of Heritage Days, plural.
okay?
That's it for me.
That's it, everybody?
Yes, and thank you, Bridget.
Okay, so let's approve A, B, C, and E, and then we'll come back to D. So, Andrew, can you make a motion?
I move that the board approve consent agenda items A, B, C, and E.
Second?
All in favor? Okay. Now, the 21 Highland Future Use Committee, they have elected a chair, who's Freddie, and a vice chair, who's Lisa Braccio, and I believe the clerk is Kristen Levant. So they've got positions elected, but they haven't gotten much done. And there's, if you look at the charge that we had in our packet, they're supposed to have an interim report by November 30th. That's not going to happen. They're supposed to have the final report by December 31st. That's not going to happen. So they've asked to extend the charge until June 30th of '25. But I pulled this because we've got to get these dates straightened out, too. There's 2 dates in here. Okay, so is everybody okay with extending the overall charge to 6/30/25?
Yes?
Okay. And then when do we want to see an interim report?
I would say at least a month before the end of the charge.
So May 31st?
Or even sooner, maybe.
We're talking about an interim report or a final report?
Interim,
Well,
Yeah.
we've asked them
Maybe,
for an interim and a final. I
was
mean,
gonna
they're a
say
month
April
apart
15th. I know
here.
you don't like April 15th much, but that date.
end of February for interim, maybe?
Okay.
Okay.
And that can be, it can be a presentation.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we want end of February for the interim, right?
Yep.
And we want June 30th of '25 for the final. Okay.
I have one other, the charge says the committee, this is, it's one line above the composition on the first page. It says, "The committee shall hold at least one public forum related to its recommendations." Can we clarify, is that a forum to announce their recommendations, or?
Where do you
to-
see that, Marguerite?
I'm sorry, it doesn't, it's like composition down here at the bottom of the first page.
Right above your finger there.
Yeah, it's the sentence above that.
Do you see what she's talking about?
No.
You see where it says composition, the heading is called composition?
Oh, there, sorry, okay.
Yeah, that the sentence above that in the paragraph, but the committee shall hold at least one public forum related to its recommendations. I understood that at the last meeting, there was some confusion about whether the public forum should be held in order to get community input about their decision, or it should be held after they've taken a set of decisions. Could we clarify that?
Should be to
I think
get
it's their
input.
call. Let them decide how to
Yeah.
do it.
And it's also not really a decision, it's just a recommendation.
Well, I guess the question was, some people on the committee wanted to do public forums to gather neighborhood input, and other people did not.
Which is fine. I mean,
Well,
they-
let them decide what to do.
it's their call.
Well, some of them wanted to, and some of them didn't want to.
Well, still, they'll have to
The
vote.
committee, they got to work it out, yeah.
That's what the committee's
There's a
for.
backstory. They did vote, and it was overridden by the chair.
It was what?
Overridden by the chair.
The chair can't do that. Chair has no formal authority.
Chair did it.
Well, the chair is out of order.
I still say, let them figure it out.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, you've heard me say before, I'll just say it one more time, until the fate of Finn is decided, I don't know how you do this, but you guys wanted this committee, so
Okay.
if they want public forums before or after the report, I think it's really their call. Right? So the request that was made to us by Freddie was to extend the charge to June 30th, which we are about to do, and we're going to move the interim report to February, it's 25, so it's no leap year, so 28th of 2025. Okay?
And final report to June.
June 30th, 25. So can someone make that motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. So Vanessa, can you change this charge and get it to Freddie, okay? And get it officially with Jim so we know what we did? Okay. we can try. Kristen, we know you're there. We may not be able to hear you, so if you want to talk, you may have to call one of our cell phones. So we'll try again, see if it works. Can you hear us?
Yep, can't hear.
How can you tell she's talking? So Kristen, we can't hear you. There's something wrong with our Zoom audio tonight. So my cell is 508, everybody knows it now, 380-3526 if you want to talk. She does. Hello.
Hi, it's Kristen.
Okay, so just go ahead. I've got the microphone pointing to my cell phone so we can all hear you.
Okay, well, I applaud the creativity. First, thank you to the board for extending our charge. The committee came together slowly, but now we've got good momentum, so thank you very much for that. I would be remiss if I didn't correct Marguerite I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Kristen Laval, 12 Southwood Drive, a member of the 21 Highland Street Future Use Committee. I just want to correct, in the minutes we'll say this, that our chair did not, she did not do anything wrong. She did not operate incorrectly, and I just can't allow that statement to lay there. We did have some back and forth about whether or not it made sense to conduct a survey, not a public forum, but a survey at this point in time. And the debate was, well, do we need to get information out first, et cetera, et cetera. We met last night, and again, we're all completely aligned in terms of our path ahead, which we, I don't want to speak for the committee nor commit to it, but we actually plan to give some updates ahead of the generous timeline you just gave us. So again, I could not let it pass to say that right now the committee is in line and our chair has, acted appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, you guys still need one more person though, right? Looks like you've got 6 right now.
Yeah, I think we have, it's our citizen at large, and fingers crossed, I think we have hopefully a local architect on board.
Okay, so we're announcing that tonight. We need a citizen at large. I hope you do. Okay,
Yep.
so you're satisfied with what we've done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good night. Okay, so that's out of the way. All right, other matters. DOR policy review and plan for implementation. Is Brian still in the audience?
Yes.
Okay, so Vanessa, so Brian, just listen, and if we need to bring you over, we will. I think this is going to be pretty easy. So as everybody remembers, DOR did 2 reviews for us, one of management policies and one of financial policies. So we're going to take up the financial policy review first. Brian's recommendation, which is in your packet, is that along with the finance team, which is basically he, Carla, Paula Sabelli, who else do we consider on the finance? That's it, right? And Mr. Purple, sorry, Mark, that one person from Select Board be appointed to be part of the process, and then one person from Advisory be part of the process, to work with them to basically come back to the Select Board with what the recommendation would be as far as what DOR is recommending that we do. So anyone have an issue with what?
Nope, I think, again, there are a lot of good recommendations in there, and
There
I think that, I'm not sure I'm on board with all of them, but I think it's worth a careful review and take what the, relevant parts of that for us and make some of those things happen, so.
All right, then we'll take up the
Good
second
thing
one.
to do.
This one. Al, any issue with that as far as process? Marguerite? Andrew?
No issues. Are we going to select a liaison? Okay.
Once we agree that, so, okay, so now it sounds like we're all on board as far as following Brian's recommendation. Who would like to be the Select Board rep to the finance group?
Well, I thought you might be a good candidate.
I'd be happy to do it, but does anybody else want to do it?
I vote for Kathy. If anybody else really wants to do it.
Al?
I'm on the fence, but I'll defer to you.
Well, do you want to do it?
Yes,
Okay, so fine with me. Okay,
put the fox amongst the henhouse.
all right, all right. Okay,
So
so,
I move that we appoint Al as our liaison to work with the advisory committee
And finance team.
and finance team on implementing the DOR policy review.
are making recommendations to implement it. So you're going to come back to us and say, we've looked at it, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is what we think you should do. So that's what we're looking for, is recommendations back to us.
Yep.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yep, second.
All right, all in favor? Okay, Al, you got another job.
Condolences.
King of the sewer, and then king
King
of
of
this.
the finance policies. Good.
That's it, you can just call me Sewer King.
I'm truly just joking. I'm very happy you're doing what you're doing as far as that goes. Okay, I thought we did this. Mark looked and said we didn't officially vote, so we've got this proposed schedule for the rest of the fiscal year in our packet, which includes the January budget summit also. It takes into account February vacation week, puts the 2 town meetings on there, so I think it looks good to me as far as what should be on there. Okay? All right,
It
so
just follows the usual schedule,
yeah, it
except
does,
for
except for February, where
Yeah.
we do the 1st and 4th. Okay? All
I'm
right.
good. Yep.
So can someone make a motion to adopt the schedule that's in our packet?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, now we have officially voted. Okay,
All right, now the big one.
it's all set. Okay, now, this to me is the heart of the meeting tonight. So we have in our packet the amended and restated IMA now it's between 3 towns, Grafton, Westboro, and Southborough. It's basically the same agreement that we had originally approved in May of
23, yeah.
23, that when new select board came on, that we then disapproved. So not much has changed in it. I've got questions, but I still would like to get this done tonight. We can get the questions answered. There's just some awkward language in here as far as how it really works, but we can get it all worked out. I think that we need to get a seat at a table. We've got the lease that's on the table. We've got the grant that we need to get going. So there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with in short term, and I want us to be there to be able to be part of it.
And I did a red line of this versus the one that we actually signed back in '23. And basically, the only changes are the administrative ones that include the third town here. And I think if any of us were to start from scratch and rewrite it, we'd change a few things. On the other hand, at least I've gotten to the place where I think we've got capacity to deal with the concerns that we had previously in here. And the biggest one, of course, was the site issue, and that's now been changed. And so that, to me, was the hurdle that caused the thing to fall apart for us. So again, I'm fine with this, and I think we ought to approve it and move forward.
I agree.
Okay, so let's go ahead. Does anybody want to talk about it first, or you want to talk about it after we vote?
So I'll just say that, I've read it as well. I would prefer a different funding mechanism, but you can't always get what you want. And
You certainly tried, though. I'll give it to you.
yeah, well, you try sometimes, you get what you need. Sorry, I had to steal that one.
That's a song,
No,
yeah.
I think, yes. We should do this. I'm in favor. And, I think the one difference over the prior agreement we haven't talked about is that we would be having our chief administrative officer be the representative rather than a select board member. But I'm good with that as well. And I think we should, after we vote here, we should take steps to make sure that Mark has a seat at the table. And we should also consider making sure that we have our CFO have a seat at the table as quickly as possible. The chiefs, I think, are already baked in.
The Chiefs are baked in. Okay, so Marguerite, do you have any comment on? Let's vote on the agreement, so we know we've got that out of the way. And then, to the extent you want to talk about anything in it or talk about next steps, let's do that afterwards. Is that okay? Sure. Okay. So Al, I think you deserve to make this motion.
I move that we approve the amended IMA as reflected in the packet.
Second.
So appropriate. All in favor? Okay. So this is consequential.
Big issue.
Yes.
2.5 years of work to get to this point. So anyway, and there won't be a new select board member before that opt-out period is. So we're done, I think, as far as B&M. And Mark's got a meeting tomorrow, so this is very timely. Okay, so now, Al, do you want to go ahead and formally memorialize Mark as our representative on the board?
So I would move that we appoint Mark Purple as our representative to the Metro West Rec Board of Directors.
Second?
All in favor?
I think we should also, I assume we're making either Mark or Carla there's a finance board as well, that we should probably have them. I'm not sure if we have to do that.
Yep. Or Brian Ballantyne. So I think Mark is supposed to appoint. I think Mark actually appoints the person, if I read this right. A finance advisor. So it says, town's chief financial officer, which is Brian, as designated by said chief administrative officer. So Mark appoints that.
Perfect.
Okay? And I assume you're going to appoint Brian, right? Okay, so again, I've got questions, but we don't have to do these tonight as far as this goes. Let's just talk about next steps, though, to make sure we're going to keep this moving forward, because that grant is going to be due soon. So it looks to me like there's two things. We got to get the lease negotiated, right? And agreed to, and that apparently is in process.
Well, let's be clear, Mark has to get the lease negotiated.
All right,
Yeah.
so you will dive into that, right?
Yeah.
And then we need to understand what the process is to put the grant itself together. Last time, I believe the Westboro Fire Chief put it together.
Right.
Okay, and I'm not sure that is necessarily the best way to go.
The other big one, too, is they've got to hire an executive director.
Yes?
That, to me,
Yeah.
is a critical step,
Yes.
and Mark will be out in the mix on that, so.
So maybe, Mark, you just, you're going to regularly report back to us at meetings what's going on, with those being the big three things that seem to be the critical path to getting this done. So if you had to guess, Al, what do you think it's going to take to truly stand this thing up time-wise? 2 years?
That would be my guess. Maybe we're lucky and it happens a little faster, but I'd put it at 2 years. They were talking about the summer of
26?
26,
Yeah.
but, I've made project estimates too. Once,
That may be a little rosy.
Hard to know, but could well be.
yeah, I would say 2 years is probably the right number.
Okay. And I assume that you and Sam will stay in touch with Mark as far as making sure you know what's going on and can help,
I am sure.
right? Okay.
We know his
But
number,
again,
know where he lives.
so Chief Achilles started this maybe 3 years ago now,
Yeah.
so this has been a long process. So I think that this is something that we should take a lot of credit for and appreciate everything you've done since you've been on the board, Al, and Sam also too.
Well, and our prior select board colleagues.
Yep, they did,
This
absolutely.
underway,
We
so-
wouldn't be here without them either, but, okay. The next two things are not quite as exciting, at least the next one's not. Okay, so there is a thing called the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. It's a big thing. It's statewide, right, Sam?
Yes, well, actually, metropolitan Boston area.
Okay, so includes big towns, big
Yeah,
cities.
yep.
We're kind of a little P in the
Yep,
whole thing.
right.
But we're not sure if we have a rep on it. It might be Debbie DeMaria, but we're not sure. And so do we want to confirm that she is our rep? Do we want to find out whether she really wants to be the rep?
Well, there are two things here. One is that we appoint a representative, but we can also appoint a designee to backstop that representative. So you could appoint two people. And I talked to Mimi Luttrell a while ago about it, and Mimi believes that Debbie is the rep, but if Debbie is, we would have appointed her, because we're the appointing authority for that. So not clear to me, and I don't remember appointing her.
I don't remember appointing Debbie either,
I
so.
have a
Maybe we
vague
did.
memory of doing that.
You think we did?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's possible. And so question for Debbie is, do you want to do it? Because Mimi doesn't believe she's attended meetings yet. There was some administrative stuff that she's not sure happened.
All right, so can we table this and you just talk
Yeah,
to,
okay.
talk to Debbie directly and
See
say,
if there are others who want this position,
yeah,
then,
let's try to find the vote. Let's make sure we really did it.
Yep.
And Debbie should know whether we appointed her or not, right? I'd ask her and
Yep,
then see if
yep.
she wants to do it,
Yep.
given she hasn't been in the meetings. If
Yep.
not, let's,
I will say that I think we get more leverage out of the Metro West Regional Collaborative, which is a smaller group, more local. And the whole MAPC is, we're a very tiny piece of that. I think it's good to have somebody there who hears what's going on and can report to us if there are interesting things there, opportunities there that we ought to pursue. But it's unlikely that we have a lot of leverage. in that world, as a matter of fact. But it's worth listening, so I think it's an important thing to do.
All right, and then Mimi and Sam are on the smaller version of this, so we've got people on that one. Okay, so sound like a plan to,
Yep, I'll follow
that?
up then with Mark and Vanessa to figure out what we did or didn't do.
okay, the next one, I'm going to turn this over to Andrew, but Andrew and I had office hours last week, and the attendees were all EDC related. Leah Emerson was there, Claire came, and then two members of EDC, Karen Anglem and the chair, Michael Nordstrom. So we spent most of the time talking about One Stop. So Andrew, I'm going to stop right there. Can you just kind of, it ended up being a
Sure.
confusing conversation, so I thought we're going to put on here to make sure we understand what we have decided we want to do.
So I think at office hours, we talked about two different types of opportunities we could apply for through One Stop. One is a corridor study, which possibly could be done in coordination with another municipality like Westborough, and we talked about doing that may increase the chances of being successful. And the other is a grant to do basically kind of like what we did with the downtown zoning district. You know, have a consultant review our current zoning code and make some recommendations about specific amendments to the zoning code that might make Route 9 more favorable to the type of development, you know, post-COVID that we're looking for. Now, another thing we talked about is that I understand that Al, and maybe Marguerite are also having some of these discussions with Chris Lund and some members of the planning board, others about, you know, low-hanging fruit, parking ratios. I think there's not a reason why we can't do all of the above, which is continue to work through, you know, kind of low-hanging fruit stuff that you could maybe bring to town meeting as soon as the annual town meeting in 2025, while also pursuing grants from One Stop. So I think it would be helpful if the board just kind of reiterated our support for, we want to submit a application for a One Stop grant that's focused on Route 9 zoning, and that could take the form of, the corridor study is less directly relevant to that, but it still could be useful. And then as a kind of a next step, it was supposed to happen today, and then it got delayed because of my own work schedule, but that on Friday, Vanessa, myself, and Leah are meeting to talk about, you know, next steps and what's the plan to get from, you know, here to submitting the expression of interest, which I think is, you submit by February 1st is when it opens. Yes, and that's where, that's not that much work, right? That's just a you know, it's a character-limited field you fit in, and that's you submit the expression of interest to get some feedback. And we have other resources that can help us, include, you know, that have experience with this. One other thing I wanted to mention was Alan Belniak, who's, you know, very knowledgeable about this, had reached out to myself and also Al recently, letting us know that MAPC has a technical assistance program which has advertising for now is the time to submit an application to see if you can get some money from their technical assistance program, which that may be another funding source we may use for this. So that has a December 13, 2024 deadline. That's what's coming up fast. And so I think we should, Alan's offered to kind of informally help think about how we can actually put together that application. So all that is, you know, we're going to be discussing on Friday morning. And stay tuned. But again, I think it'd be helpful if we just, as a board, reiterate this is something that we want to do.
Should we make a vote to deputize you to work with Alan, Vanessa, and others to actually apply for that technical assistance grant? Timing-wise, we'd have to do that quickly here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about for the MAPC?
MAPC, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, to me, those
The
kind
one
of
we know
grants...
the one we don't know if we have a member on or not
Yeah.
yet.
Well, we'll take their money, we don't need a membership.
Okay.
But again, it seems to me that those kind of technical assistance grants are typically fairly straightforward to get.
Yep.
fairly small numbers, $10,000, $20,000, something like that.
Yep,
But that
yep.
could be very helpful
Okay,
in this process. I don't see why we wouldn't do that.
sure.
And you don't need a huge amount of paperwork to do those kind of
Yep.
things typically. So if you're willing to do that, with
Okay.
Vanessa and others to put that in, it seems to me that's a no-lose kind of deal.
Yep.
So when you ask for technical assistance, what are you going to ask for technical assistance for? Zoning?
Yeah,
Yes.
zoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Route 9 zoning. And again, I think both these are, I think, very sort of parallel projects in the sense that I think there are some fairly straightforward, easy to explain, low-hanging fruit kind of items in our zoning code that the planning board has talked about some of this. It seems to me we, working with the planning board, ought to have a goal of having a zoning bylaw update for April town meeting that picks off a few of those things and gets people used to making those kind of updates.
And you should do them one at a
Yeah,
time,
Yep,
easy, so
Yep.
people understand them,
yep,
right?
exactly. And I think there are several of those that we could do that have a pretty good chance of success. So again, Chris Lund has some ideas there. The planning board has had some specific proposals for that make a lot of sense to me. So
Okay.
we keep going with that one, but short term.
So Andrew, we have asked you tonight to do the grant for the MIPC by the 13th. Coordinate that with Vanessa. And then when you meet on Friday, do you think you're going to come away with knowing where you're going as far as the one-stop grant?
I hope so.
Okay. Because I don't understand, I get the zoning and asking for help with zoning on Route 9. I don't really understand what all the quarter study would entail. To me, Westboro looks a lot different than Southborough on Route 9, because everybody looks different than Southborough, right, on Route 9. I think Rob Anderson should be consulted, given that's where he sits in the state, and he's the one that told us last May, oh, please apply for the quarter grant. So anyway, but at some point, we got to pick our major here and decide what we're going to apply for so we can get it ready. I know the expression of interest is easy, but we just don't want to be caught like we are in April, May, rushing to get this done, so we want to have it ready long before then, right? Okay, so it sounds like it's all on you.
Congratulations.
But are you okay so far as at least leading the effort as far as the one-stop goes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right, so Leah made the comment at this meeting that she thinks we ought to apply for 20 one-stop grants or something like that, because the more you put in, the more chance you get. 20 for what? I mean, we don't have the bandwidth to apply for 20. So it was just a really confusing meeting, so that's why I wanted to bring it forth to make sure we're on the same page as far as where we want to go with this.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Everybody's okay with that?
Yep.
All right. So I don't think there's really anything to vote on that. You've got the 13th, and then you've got February 1st. Right?
Yes.
Okay, you're okay with that?
Yes.
You're smiling.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right, so that's all we've got. Anybody else in the audience for public comment?
No hands up.
No? All right, motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're not doing anything with board and committee vacancies.
Pardon?
We're not doing
Well, okay, so
board and committee
It's not on the agenda.
I
is
move
it?
that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
vacancies. No, it was just,
All in favor? Marguerite? Okay,
I'm so in favor.
Okay.
So what about
we have adjourned.